And I remember the first time my boss actually was in a meeting. It was the first few weeks that I was in the role as an in-house counsel. And so it was quite a big matter that I was just there observing. And my boss just essentially just said, I have no idea. And she was so so casual. She's so senior. I was just like, what? I don't know.
Let's start this thing, Paul. Hello, I'm Sam.
And I'm Amelia.
Welcome back to Ask the Duo podcast where we aim to build better mindset for better relationships.
Yeah, and this week on Better Mindset, we're going to be talking about mindset around common career concerns and also career mistakes. But when we say mistakes, we're talking about just lessons that we've learned from these mistakes that we've had along our career journeys. And did you know that we actually spent 90,000 hours in our life, which also equates to a third of your life spent at work?
Damn. That's a lot of time. And as we all know, career takes up a massive chunk of our lives.
Chipping away at keyboards or whatever you do at work.
Yeah. And with that, we've brought in two special ladies.
And also one that couldn't make it.
One that couldn't make it, but
with us in spirit.
As you guys may have potentially seen them around on the social medias, floating around, flapping around. These lovely ladies also do have a podcast, Candid Conversations.
Candid Conversations.
And they are a massive advocate for individual career growth, but also the balance within career.
Yeah, so welcome Jackie and Shirley, also known as Women in Progress.
Thanks, guys. What an introduction. It's so really big on the receiving end of that.
It is, right? But we'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Well, I'm Jackie, and I'm one of the three ladies who've started Women in Progress. Bit of background in terms of career-wise. I've been in marketing for the last 8 years and then recently did a pivot into a different function known as category, which we can talk about later. I've known both the girls for over 15 to 20 years. So it started as a friendship, and kind of what you're saying, Sam, we had a really strong passion about wanting to, I guess, have the conversation around, yes, it's great to, pursue what you think is success in your career, but also, how do you find that balance within your work and find the thing that fulfills you as well. So it's kind of been the mission since we started over 18 months ago.
Yeah, we love that. And Shirley?
I'm Shirley. I'm the second lady of the three. I am a lawyer and I work in-house. And for those that aren't very clear what in-house is, it's essentially just a large corporation, and I happen to sit in the legal team. I do risk mitigation on a daily basis, which I've come to love, and I think I've taken it a bit too far and bring it to my personal relationships too. But I think it's a part of me now, and I love what I do. And I think because I do love my job and the work and why it's so fulfilling to me, I care so deeply about hoping the people around me also find a job or career that's like that for them. So known Jackie since kindergarten, so we met in primary school.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so a really long time. And Wendy, I met through Jackie in high school. So yeah, it's been wild seeing them grow and also in their careers as well. And yeah, I think the fact that we're all connected by this common vision just makes this even more fulfilling.
Yeah,
awesome.
And we're really grateful for you guys to hop on and also just to find out that we have similar values and things that we advocate for, even though yours is very focused about career, but it's still around that mindset and also how to better yourself and finding the things that you love, which is really great. So we're so excited to have this conversation.
So very excited.
But let's start off with, because you guys have so many guests and talking to so many people, even outside of the podcast, about career, what are the top common career concerns that you've found within the people that you've talked to?
Yeah, I think it's even just interesting because I think on the outside there are concerns and we can dig into it, but I think there's so many learnings, as you were saying, there may not be mistakes because it depends on your mindset and how you think about it. But I guess the biggest one that comes to mind is definitely what we're talking about, finding the balance in life and work. And I think when you first start in your career, you're kind of young, keen bean, and you're just like happy to throw your whole body on the line for the job you do, because you want to, one, prove yourself, to also prove to the people who hired you that you can do the job. But I think as you progress through your career and conflicting priorities, as well as maybe your values become clearer to yourself as well, that's been like a very key theme that across different guests, even within like ourselves, when you and I both speak about it in our like individual podcast episodes, about just finding what is the right amount of effort in terms of like your energy to the actual output required from a work perspective as well. So I think that's probably the biggest one. Like, we've had a debate about calling it work-life balance because that's different to each person and what that means as well. So I guess, in other words, it's like, how do you fit work within the rest of your life? Because, work is not your whole life, is what we believe. And it doesn't also exist in a vacuum either. So how do all the other things, complement, or at least how does it fit in the jigsaw that is someone's life? And I think it's interesting because we have guests, from all different, industries, or even like walks of life as well. And in all of them, and particularly, we started this sort of during COVID, post-COVID, that sentiment has been very clear that for most people, if they're not feeling like they're 100% fulfilled in work, then immediately they're like, well, why am I giving so much? And then why is the balance not feeling right? So I'd say that's probably the key theme that's come up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think that is true, because that is also something that we've been feeling lately as well. Is just like, after all these years of grinding and working your way higher up and learning and soaking in things like a sponge, you get to a point that's like, have I just gone too far in soaking up and just working my way through? Like, is this something that I want to pursue, continue, or do I need to change or something?
Yeah, it's more like is it really worth it at the end, is that question? Yeah.
That's a very good question.
Yeah, I think when you reach that, I don't know if it's a midlife crisis, but maybe
Quarter.
the mini crisis
Yeah.
after the midlife crisis, quarter life crisis. I think there comes that little question in mind where it's, what really is important. And I think nowadays, a lot of our friends around us are sort of getting engaged. Jackie's engaged.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
I think, well, at least for me personally, I think seeing all that, and I think there has been a lot of questions around, what exactly is important. I think the last few years, a lot of that was focused on career after graduating, but now it's just finding what's truly important. And yeah, it's been a common question for myself as well. So it really hits home, and talking to our guests about it means that it's a prevalent issue as well.
Yeah, and it shows that you're not alone. Like, everyone's going through a similar situation. And I think we did put out a poll like ages and ages ago, and it was around like, do you feel like you're in a place where you want to make a change, or you're happy with your job? And the big chunk of the results was they felt like they need a change. So it's still evident in that as well.
Yeah. It's crazy because so many people are thinking the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not really spoken about too, which is an interesting thing.
And I think like in the past, like say our generations, our parents, like I've always thought this, I'm like, how did they stick doing that one job from when they moved to Australia to, whenever they were retired, and they've just done that one thing. And it's just crazy to think that they did that, and how much persistence they would have had to stick with that.
Agree. And I think because it's almost like maybe the trigger is like, there are so many options now available, and you see so many cases where people have done like big lifestyle changes or career pivots that you're like, oh, it's like, one, if you're not happy with where you are in your career, it's possible to leave. Like, I think it's almost like, if you don't see a precedent before you, or you don't have a role model, you think like, well, maybe this is it for me, right? But for us, there's just the options are limitless, and it's almost overwhelming then to be like, well, what do we want to get in? Like, besides, doing marketing for the last 8 years, like, what else am I good at? Like, there's those questions that come out because you just go down this one path of like, oh, we'll just keep going up, right? Just like you think a career is like, but we're, big advocates on lateral moves, or even just taking a career break to actually take the time to evaluate, like, what's your value system? How does that interline with like how you feel at work and how you're currently feeling, and then digging deeper to why you're not satisfied where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there any other common career concerns as well?
A big one that we found across the board was dealing with imposter syndrome. I think most of our guests have spoken about it. If not in the episode, we may have spoken about it offline.
Mm.
And it's so interesting how it comes out, because it's not just, I think we commonly think of imposter syndrome as, oh, you're not good enough. And you think of it in like a certain setting, you're at work, you're dealing with a certain matter, etc. Except it could come out in certain things, like I spoke about in my episode, how I won an award, but I was like, am I even deserving of that award? Like just like quick switch just for a second there just comes out just like that. And I think raising awareness about how everyone does. Well, I don't know. I can't speak for everyone. I think most people have felt imposter syndrome at one stage,
Mm.
and having the proper tools or mechanisms to almost cope with that line of thinking, I think, is very healthy. And there are some that have to go through that entire stage where they're just like, oh, this doesn't feel very good. I feel very uncomfortable with this feeling. And then there are some that I think in that scenario, I was able to just switch it off and just say, no, I do deserve it, etc. So it's very interesting to see how people or whys come about. And then you think about, oh, they're so great. How could they think
Yeah.
like of themselves like that? So that was interesting.
It's perspective as well, and also again mindset, just believing in yourself. And just because your work doesn't look like someone else's work doesn't mean that you're not good. Everyone's good in their own ways, and
Mm.
I do see that as a common one too, because me being in the design and creative industry, I go to this massive conference that is in Brisbane. I don't know if it's in any other states at the moment, but it's huge. They fly in like talkers and speakers from around the world who are now really big in the creative industry, whether they're branding or like just an agency. And all of them that gets on stage, they still say that they get imposter syndrome. And
Mm.
you as a viewer, you're like, wow, you guys made it. Like you have your own agency, you're head of design, you're like art director or whatever it is, and they're just like, no, I still feel imposter syndrome. And that really hits you because you're like, wow, even people that big gets that same feeling, and you just remember that everyone is still human. Like just because they're up there doesn't mean that they're higher than you or like better than you. Like they're still human as well.
Yeah. So we had two guests that like come to mind who had very like significant and different perspectives of imposter syndrome, and like kind of what Shel was saying with the tools and how you maybe overcome it. They actually lean into imposter syndrome, so you use it to your advantage. So Nicole talks about it from a perspective of like, if you feel imposter syndrome in a room full of people who are either more senior than you, that's probably a good thing because you're in the right room to learn, right?
Mhm.
And if you already have that feeling of like, oh, you feel like you're not good enough, right, in, funny ears, you're probably going to ask more questions to feel that gap, even if it doesn't exist, right? And naturally it means you'll learn more. So I thought that was a really good way to like, instead of shying away from it or trying to prevent it, actually like be okay with it. Like people feel it from, it's like a spectrum, right? So like lean into it. So I thought that was interesting. And then another guest of ours, Kayla, she talks about it from a perspective of like when you do have it, right, like in terms of the tools and you do feel inadequate in whatever way, find the people, in your network, mentors who aren't just going to give you, the practical solution, but actually listen to you. And instead of trying to fix the problem, which often, not everybody's looking for, they help you ask the right questions so that you can get there yourself, which I thought was quite an interesting way. And not often, when you feel frustrated or you feel vulnerable, people often are jumping to the solution, but it's actually working through it that
Yeah.
can help you build that stronger, mindset too.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
are some really important ones. And even for me myself, starting early on in the graphic design journey and feeling that imposter syndrome, I'm kind of like that first example. I lean into it because it means that you are curious to know more, and then like also similar to like a lot of psychology concept, it's like you feel, or like even meditating, like you feel the way that you feel and you're like, okay, this is what I'm feeling, this is fine, like I'll work with it or like let it be. Like you're not trying to push it away, you're just accepting it. And then it's like, what do I need to do to become better or learn more, be more curious? And you just kind of like thinking about the next steps rather than being like, I'm feeling this, I don't want to feel this, and trying to push it away.
I think this is quite common in the top 4 financial institutions. they do things called banker days. So they'll just pull everyone who is a banker or a lender. And what they do is they bring on like the top performing bankers and they speak about them. And what they try to teach others is, hey, your processes and how you do certain exercises, you can do it like this. And it's sort of similar in the fact of what Nicole was saying is you have a mentor or you can see someone that's obviously performing well above what you are. So you try to work to that level, if you want to call it that. And it's just seeing how they do things that you could maybe potentially replicate or put that as a part of your regime to perform better.
Nice. Interesting that they have those days for it.
I know
which is-
it's weird, but
I think it's good. It's really helpful, and it's kind of I can see that a lot of corporate world or even workplaces are now putting in a lot more of that mental health and just mindset, or even just open days where you can just be vulnerable. And I think that's a good thing to have.
yeah, I see the other side as well. I think there are people who would take it the other way because, you know, some people are motivated by different things, right? So some people may think of it as if it's trying to show off that this guy is the top dog and, you know, it's demotivating to some degree. So I can see it sort of pushing it the other way.
Yeah, I think it's also important how you deliver that too.
Yeah, 100%.
The probably third other concern that we've seen, and definitely one that we have talked about like between ourselves, is the idea, I think, as you've worked for a while, that you've plateaued and you're not really sure if you're in the right place or if it's okay to plateau. Because I think, like, particularly if you have a certain upbringing and we kind of come from a Asian background, there's that, you know, talk track around, you know, you work hard and you keep improving yourself, which there's nothing wrong with that. But there's also nothing wrong with, like we were saying, being really good at what you do and being satisfied in that space too, and not necessarily like needing to go up a corporate ladder from a linear perspective. But I think it's this constant battle for a lot of people because it's like this whole time, and even just thinking about how schooling works, right? And education. You're kind of like, okay, you do this test, and if you do well, you get into this. And then you've kind of been primed your whole life to kind of go up. So it's something that I think is a concern to a lot of people because that's a previous mindset that they might have had. But I think once you kind of get maybe to the other side and you're comfortable with like what your values are, and okay, maybe I don't want to go up because I really value spending time with my family, right? And unfortunately going up means more responsibility. So I'm okay to be in this position but still be very good at my job. It's not about being lazy or like, you know, quite quitting, as you know, that trend we heard about. But yeah, it is one that we talk about a lot, and I don't know if there's like a definitive way of like, you know, overcoming it per se, but a very interesting topic that has come across like many conversations we've had.
Yeah, that was something that we wanted to bring up and was going to ask you as well. But yeah, like plateauing. And it just seems like a lot of people right now have hit that stage. And it could be because we're all around that same age. We've done whatever we've done for the past 10 years, like 5 to 10 years. And you just like hit that stage where you kind of questioning, like, do I still enjoy this anymore? Have I just been on this journey for so long that you haven't even reflected if I like this job or not? But like on like a similar conversation, I asked this I guess a mentor that I was talking to. Like I'm in the creative industry, but I was like in digital marketing. But in that one job, I did digital marketing, I did social media, I did like project coordination, I did graphic design, I did the meeting. So I kind of honed in all of those aspects, and I got to a point where I was like, now I've learned everything across those, and I know I'm like competent in all of them. But then it's like to find a job, because I really enjoy all of it, and it's hard for me to give up one and be like, okay, I'm going to head in this direction. So I asked this mentor that I was talking to, and it's like, how do you pick a path or where you specialize or what you do or where do I go? Like I'm just like plateaued in that situation where I just don't know which way I'm going. And she was saying like a lot of these things when you see people talk or like people who go panel speaking, they all specialize in something, but that's what gives them that specialty to go up and talk. But she's like, you don't realize how many like unicorns or generalists out there are. So just because they're not out there speaking doesn't mean there's no one like you out there. So I think that's kind of like similar to what you were talking about before as well.
I agree. I think Wendy Shirley would speak like volumes about this because she's got a consultant background both in, you know, the public and the private sector, and her episode is literally called like Jack of all trades, master of none, because it's like, well, where do I go from here? Because you're so good at all these different things, but you just don't know how to pick which one to specialize in. But I think the big thing is like it's also okay to just be really good at a number of things, to be okay to figuring it out, or just jumping from different things depending on kind of time in life as well, like life stage, as well as like what comes easily to you as well, can help be a guide as to like, okay, well, what should I try first? Or maybe this is the one I want to specialize in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So his friend Brendan, who was a guest on ours, it's like sometimes you just have to make a decision. So the analogy was, so he is, what was that, architecture, like interior designer, and he's like, it's like picking shades of white. They're all white, but in the end, you have to go with one, right? So he's like, that's one analogy. In the end, you have decisions to make. You still have to go with one. And also remember that if you're going to try something, stick with it, try and give it your all. And then if that doesn't work, then you change. Don't like do a little bit of this and do a little that and like, kind of just confuse yourself.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the generalist part because I'm, as an in-house counsel, I am a generalist. I was going to say that there is also beauty in being a generalist as well, because there is a diversity in work, and I sought that variation in my work rather than trying to go down a path where I was pursuing specialization. And I think I realized that when in my previous role, I just thought I cannot pick anything. Everything here sounds very interesting, but I don't think I love a particular practice area enough for me to just do that for the rest of my life. So it's good that these generalist roles are there as well, because not everyone works the same nor thinks the same. So
how did you fall into that generalist position? Like, was it something that you were specifically looking for in a role, or you just manifested it into your life? Or
well, in an in-house role, when you're a generalist, it means that you don't specialize in a certain law or a practice area, as we call it. So there are some that are employment lawyers or litigation lawyers, but we basically just dabble in everything and we give advice on everything. So
that's awesome.
Which can be scary at times, because you're like, okay, you're not an expert at HR law, but you're giving advice on this and someone's livelihood. But then there's also, if it goes into, for instance, like marketing claims or anything like that, at least it just makes the day very interesting. So that's what I enjoy. And that's maybe what, Amelia, you're saying about how you're doing project coordination, your graphic design, web design, social media, digital marketing, right? It's just maybe you just loved all of them. You just couldn't pick. So
yeah,
I don't blame you.
I do love all of it, and it's just hard to just pick one direction. And it's been my dilemma for the past 3 years, and I'm still questioning it. So yeah.
Yeah, it seems like everyone goes through that plateauing in their career, because even I went through that same thing too. Like my previous role, I was doing everything. I was doing like building platforms for like a digital fintech lender. I was running teams and doing all these sort of things. And exactly that. It's just so hard to sort of realize that hone in of which area that you want to play in. And I think, just thinking back about what floats your boat is essentially what people say, right? You've got to really rely on that.
Intuition, I think, but also the intuition that comes from experience, right? Because it's over time that you're like, okay, this is something that I really, truly enjoy, but maybe a bit more than this area, so I might gravitate there.
Yeah.
And it's also remembering that no matter what you pick, you always learn something out of it. So it's not making the wrong choice. Like, it's never a wrong choice. It's just that either you took a longer path, but either way, you still learn something out of it.
Yeah. I'm really interested about you guys. Now that we're talking about lessons and our career and whatnot, is there one thing that like a lesson that you've learned that you would never do again in your career?
Wow, that's a big one. And I think it's not one I think it's one I struggle with, and that's why it's a big lesson. I think it's like a constant like adjust one. And I am definitely, and I have gone better at it, but I'm definitely a perfectionist. And over time, I've seen the detriments of being a perfectionist in terms of like putting a really high bar that doesn't really exist except within your own internal sort of standards. And I remember once, like I got to a point in a previous role where it just was all too much, and like mentally I was really drained, and it really like impacted like how I operated on a day to day. And then I was speaking to my manager about it at the time, and she was like to me, she was like, Jackie, you need to think about it like this, like your 80% is someone's 100%. And
Such a good
you just
perspective.
need to actually have a look at, how much effort you put into everything, and actually understand, well, is it worth the impact that it's going to deliver, right? So, if the task is, I don't know, writing an email, let's simplify it a lot, versus you're going to present to the CEO, the level of effort between the two, right? Okay, let's very simple, right? It's probably not going to be, shouldn't be the same amount if the impact is going to be quite different. But I think how I would approach work, and I sometimes still slip into it, is that, well, everything needs to be at 100% because that's just how I work, right? But it becomes very taxing on yourself. You don't have the luxury of time, unfortunately, to give that, and 80% or even less sometimes is enough to get the job done. And that's been a huge lesson for me, because you just don't have the bandwidth to be able to give that all across everything you do. And it's also like this impossible standard that you'll never reach either. So I think that's one that, because it happened quite a lot, I have to pull myself in and back and forth a little bit. But it's such an important lesson that for any other perfectionists out there, it's like a constant reminder to yourself that, hey, like no one's even expecting this from you. It's your own internal dialogue. So to reevaluate kind of like, why do you feel stressed about this task? Is it because you think it needs to be X when really no one is expecting that from you?
Yeah, no, that's a really important one. So when you just going back into like the simpler tasks, like for example, writing emails, are you trying to answer every email, getting your inbox to zero, or is it like it has to be like capital letters at every like sentence, or like what type of way were you trying to perfect something like that?
I mean, I'm a stickler for grammar, but because like I'm offering it 1,000 miles a minute, I'm like, okay, well, there's a typo, but we're not going to stress about that, and letting go of things like that. Or it's just like, instead of typing up, an essay of an email, like thinking about, well, is it actually easier to just go pick up the phone and have a conversation about it? Like just thinking about efforts and reward, like on a graph almost. And then if it's like, okay, well, this is to be presented to the CEO. Okay, like my time and effort required here needs to like be, 60% of my day, versus being stressed about like the last minute urgent task. Like it's like a mix of both knowing what's important and prioritization, and then looking at the effort required on your part.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah, because I had an analogy that explains something similar to that. Someone was telling me that it's like you being a hamster on a hamster wheel. You're running at 100%, and sometimes you just need to jump off the wheel to reevaluate how you're going, what's the situation, and the effort that you're putting into whatever you're doing. So yeah, you just got to really pull yourself back, as what you're saying before, from that.
Yeah. What about you, Shirley?
So one lesson that I would say I don't know about shouldn't do, but I think I have to say this in order to do it in the future. But one thing I need to get better at is I don't know everything, and that's okay. I spoke about it in my episode as well. And honestly, when I was trying to think about what I could say for this kind of question, this one nearly didn't come up because I've really been working on it actively. But I was always the type where I needed, not so much I need to know everything because I'm the best or anything like that, but rather it was I wanted to always be prepared. And I guess there's almost that sense of control, and maybe there's that perfectionism just coming out as well. And so, I'd always I'll prepare for my meetings. If there's emails that come through asking for advice, make sure I know ahead of time. And maybe that's also part of what I do for work. You're in a position where you're giving legal advice. It's not you can't just say whatever you like. People will take your word for it.
Yeah, it's hard in your industry.
Exactly. So it's really powerful, the words that come through what I say, and I have to manage that with very responsibly as well. And I remember the first time my boss actually was in a meeting. It was the first few weeks that I was in the role, and my current role, that is, as an in-house counsel, and it was my first time in-house. And so it was quite a big matter, but I was just there observing And my boss just essentially just said, I have no idea. And she was so like so casual. She's so senior.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what? I don't know. And so I was just thinking, what's she gonna do about this situation?
Yeah.
She goes, I don't know. I'll work it out. And she goes, just tell me the situation and I'll come back to you. And I talked to a colleague. So there's 3 lawyers in the team, including my boss and I. And my other colleague just said, Shirley, it's completely okay if you don't know. And I just looked at him and said, I don't think that's okay. Like, I'm so junior in this team that I don't think that's possible. And as time had passed, it's been close to 4 years now, actually. And I've truly understood what that means now. I'm putting it more in practice. I still prepare and everything, but nowadays I'm just, there's no sense of anxiety that comes with saying I don't know. If anything, I'm just saying, okay, just I don't know the answer right now, but I'll get back to you. And I think that was the tip that my colleague said to me, because I honestly was like, what do I say after I don't know?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, you have to give me something to work with,
Yeah.
or just get back to them. So very big lesson for
Yeah,
me.
no, that's a really important one, and it definitely is okay to not know, because like we're not Google, we're not Wikipedia. We're not gonna like control find and find the answers straight away. So it's totally okay to not know and just learn as you go as well.
Exactly.
I think one career, like not a mistake, but just something, a big lesson that I've learnt more prominent in the recent years is just, I know that a lot of people say like stick to your job for a year, or like try and stick to it for like at least 2 years so it doesn't look bad in your resume, or like even, I think this applies to anything in life. If you genuinely feel like this is not the right thing for you, it's better to, don't linger and stay in that place in one position for too long where now it just affects you mentally. Like you're not happy with what you're doing, you're not happy with your position, or not happy with the task. And like, as much as it is kind of like the workplace, but it is also you. Like you didn't make that choice to move on, you didn't make the choice to continue to work towards something that you want to. So that's a big lesson that I've learned recently.
It's like, listen to your gut, essentially.
Yeah. And even if like you can try to hold on as much as you want, like you want to reach that year, not look bad on your resume. But if it really is affecting you mentally, physically, emotionally, it's probably better that you leave than to stay around.
I don't know why, but I randomly thought of this song. You guys know this, Listen to Your Heart by DHT.
Listen to your heart.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I thought about. I thought about that. I was like, oh, God, I missed
But
that
that
song.
is true. Listen to your heart.
Yeah.
What was the song? I didn't quite catch it.
Listen to Your Heart by DHT.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It's that dancey song, if you remember.
Dancey song.
From the early 2000s, I think it is.
Check it out after. It's a good
Yeah,
song.
I probably know it if
For me, this is probably more a lesson that I learned throughout my career growth, and it's an analogy. It's hitching your wagon. So what they say is you hitch your wagon to the right person, whether that's a mentor, someone that can guide you, drive you to the right direction. And I think that was a big lesson that I learned throughout my career growth, was hitching my wagon to the wrong people. So finding the right person who will guide you, mentor you, and help you. And ultimately what you mentioned, I think, Jackie, before, was just listening, like someone to listen to you. And that's really important, because it's not about finding a solution. It's not about getting that answer straight away. It's about, hey, how can we go by it? And how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, finding the right people to support you in your network is so important.
Yeah,
And
100%.
I think you don't realize the significance of it until you have found those people around you. And you're
Yeah.
thinking, God, what was I doing before?
Yeah.
Only a day before. So good lesson.
Yeah.
The champions as well, like within your network, because like I don't think we realize how important it is to have people advocate for you behind closed doors. Like they might obviously say to your face, oh, like really great your job, Amelia, but it's actually the conversations they have, with other people that you don't know, that are probably like happening in the background, that might present opportunities that you never had before, or help you solve an issue a lot easier. So yeah, it is very much like finding the people who you can relate to something, so that it's a genuine, like, relationship.
Yeah, and I think that follows through in terms of like friendships or other relationships that you have around too. Because if it's not that they're wrong or the way that they think is like incorrect, it's just that you need to find people who might work similar to you, similar communication styles, or have the same values, and they can help you be a better person. Whereas, like, if you have someone who's completely different, thinks a different way, someone might be like very logical, someone's like very like more emotional. It's like very
Mhm.
different styles, and it's going to be hard to understand what they're trying to teach you if they're very different too.
Agree.
I was gonna flip the switch here. I know we were talking about what are the things that we would never do again, but what are the best career advice that someone has given us?
And that could be like mindset. It doesn't have to be like the career itself, but maybe in a way of like perception of a certain way that you're thinking, or like a mindset thing.
I mean, probably my recent, like I was saying, job change. I think growing up, as we were talking about, it was always like, the nirvana to kind of keep going up and become I don't know, marketing director. Because, I genuinely really enjoyed marketing. I really liked understanding people, the psychology of why people do the things they do, but then actually don't act in that way. But then I guess, like as we were talking about, as you've kind of progressed through your career as well, I just started to evaluate like, and for me, learning's a big piece as well. I think getting to the point where I was like, okay, I'm still learning. Like I'll always, find things to learn, but it just wasn't at the exponential rate that you kind of feel when you first start a role. And I guess for me, it felt like I was plateauing. And I think now where I'm at is like, it's actually great that I've decided to take a lateral move and learn something completely new.
Mm.
And that's been the positive sort of lesson that, like learning as the anchor as opposed to showing, jumps in titles or pay or, whatever it is to symbolize like status, right? Because actually in the long run, that learning's probably going to pay off in other ways or opportunities I never would have had if I just continued to specialize in marketing. So in a roundabout way to answer the question, I think for me, it's now like, the great thing about it is that I've learned more about even my own, what motivates me at work, as opposed to even just being like, oh, I really liked marketing because of this. It's actually what I actually like working or being in a job that fulfills me because I'm constantly learning. So,
Yeah, no, that's a really
Yeah,
good
that's
one.
good.
I think I'm going to add on to Jackie's point actually, and it's actually very relevant to what's going on in my life right now. So I feel like this is top of mind. But you talk so much on Women in Progress about how you should know your values, and I think time and again, there's a lot of questions around, why are you in the position that you're in? For instance, do you like your job? Doing that check-in with myself, and recently just a lot of things have happened where on a personal level where it just made me reflect, am I really making good decisions here? And it's sad that it takes things like that to happen for you to realize. At the same time, it's so momentous that it makes you think, okay, you really need to stop and reflect. And so I think coming back to what's important to me, my values, and I think I started going to therapy earlier this year, and it was part of it was I wanted to get to know myself on an even deeper level.
Nice.
And I have really fantastic conversations with Jackie and Wendy and my other friends, really deep conversations, but I think I wanted more for professional help as well and from their lens. And I think through that, I was able to understand, okay, I do this certain things because of this. And so I was also able to really intrinsically understand what my values were. And one of those values was that I do really prioritize work, but I also do so because of certain reasons from growing up. And so nowadays, when I'm hearing my friends, they're just saying, "Oh, I'm not happy in this position." I always link it back to values, and it's so funny because no matter how deep the conversation goes, it's always, does this fulfill you in the way that stays true to your values? And I think there have been a few people that I've actually sat down and just be like, let's do this values exercise together. And
Yeah.
actually,
that's so good.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
and doing it together, they've realized, wow, okay, this may not actually align with my values. And so I think my career lesson is that even now, and I think in 10, 20 years time, constantly just evaluating what's important to me will, I think, help us live a more fulfilling life and a better mindset.
That's really good. I just wanted to tee in on that. This isn't the career advice I was going to share, but I also went to therapist before, and it's like to find that value, it's always asking why. So when you answer that first question, that's the first layer of why you're feeling a certain way. But you need to ask why again and again and again. And when you keep asking that, you kind of get to the initial like core reason of why you feel some way or a core value that you're feeling. And that's when you find out what doesn't align or what does align with you. So I thought that's like something that I could share from also a therapy session that I've had too.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar in the fact of value. I think it was my previous boss or slash mentor. And one of the things he said was, you need to start speaking up. You need to start valuing what you are and what you are truly trying to chase. Because if you don't speak up on it, one, you're not acknowledging it. And two, you're not accepting it in the fact that you're chasing it. So you've got to really seek what you're trying to chase. And I was like, damn,
I think
okay.
there was a quote. It was like, I'm probably butchering it, but it's like, if you don't take control of your own life, someone else will control your life.
We need to put our damn button there.
It's so true. Like, even just dumb it down to like a work sense. Like, you know how people are like, if you don't like control your calendar, someone else will.
Yeah.
In all these meetings, and you can't control how your day is going to pan out.
Yeah.
It's literally the same like when you expand it out to the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the career advice I was going to share is like the worst that people can say is no. So what that kind of means is like just ask the question, just go out there and go for whatever you want to do, or ask that curious question, because the worst that they can say is no. And even if they say no, at least you've got the clarity. So similar to something we've shared in the past, but it's like it's just taking away all the guesswork and all the assumptions, and you just get clarity, and you know, now you know where to move on to or what to do next.
Agree. No like gray areas.
Yeah. So we'll move on to a little bit of like breaking away from like old school mentality or like traditional mentality and some stereotypes. And it's just like, you know, how your thoughts are on like this mindset, and like, is there some truth to it, or like what are some learnings that you feel you could share with this? And more so on the like, if you work longer hours, like one of them is if you're working longer hours, you earn more money. Like people can see that you're doing the work. Like, do you think that's kind of true?
I mean, define good money. Because if you think about like, if I'm still being paid a salary and I'm working, let's say supposedly 9 to 5, right? And I'm working longer, I mean, you're not really like, to be honest, you're making less money, right?
Yeah, that
I
is
guess
so
it depends on what's the definition of good money? Is it just the fact like at a standard level I don't know, you're in the top 6% in, you know, the ABS, right? Or whatever. But I don't think it's so much the number you get. It's also like for the, again, impact or effort you put in. Does that fulfill you as well in terms of, you know, how much effort? Because I know Cheryl can speak to this because she often works long hours, and I personally just can't, like, because I know how much energy that I can put in, and I'm like, okay, I work my, let's say 9 to 5 or whatever it is, but I know I put in everything that I have, and I'm earning decent money. But it's like knowing yourself and your bandwidth, I think, is important in the context of this question.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And we're only asking this because we're thinking of our parents who might have more than one job, and they think that putting in more hours means that you can provide for the family, or like you can earn more money so that your kids can do the things that they want. So that was kind of like the context of why we asked that.
I think the thing to add on is that, which I think Jackie has seen because she's known me for so long, but my parents own a restaurant, and so as a result, they work 13 hours a day, 7 days a week, and have done so for the past 23 years. And so because of that, I have realized that I also have taken on their tendencies to work very long hours. And so I didn't realize that this is not a norm, or at least to the extent that I was like, oh, this is okay. You know, I can continue at this rate. And what I realized is that working long hours back then was almost a necessity. And I understand why they have to do it. But at the same time, now with our current roles, just, you know, we're no longer, well, at least I'm not in the restaurant business. As much as my parents would love that, I'm not in that. They remind me every day. They're like, oh, it's a wasted opportunity. But I'm like, but isn't it every Asian's parents' dream?
Yeah,
They say like I have a lawyer or the doctor in a family. I don't.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think because of that, I can no longer say that the stereotype can exist in the way that it did before, in the same way or the same meaning.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And same thing. I just saw my parents when we go to sleep, they're still up till like 2, 3 a.m. doing I don't even know what, like some sort of paperwork. You wake up and they're already up. So it's like they're just working constantly. And that's also what I saw too. And that kind of ties back into one of those stereotypes or the way of working before is that like you put your heads down and you just do the work. And that was originally how I worked. And then over time, I realized that this is not healthy to do that, and like it flows into other things about like not speaking up, not like voicing your concerns and following a boss or feeling bad about doing something that's opposing to someone. It's like it falls into all these other things and it's just not healthy.
It's also how sustainable that is as well, right? In terms of impacting your mental and physical health. Sure, you might be able to do it for a few years, but then how does that actually have like flow-on effects to the rest of your life?
Yeah, and like more money, higher salary doesn't always mean you're happier too. And I think that's usually the correlation is like, oh, more money means you're happier, but it's not always the case. Like if you're tired, run down, you're gonna be spending your time just resting at home because you're so burnt out. You're not spending that money anyway, or like you're just stressed and now you have to spend all your money elsewhere to kind of help fix yourself. It's not healthy.
Yeah. And there are some people who are high performance that live and breathe, the long hours too, right? So they're special 1%ers that.
But it's like that comes down to knowing yourself.
Yeah,
like if
of course.
you're okay with that, then by all means strive for it. But if you're not, then don't force yourself to be like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about the breaking away from like I guess the culture that you see at home, Asian culture and whatnot, with the way things are going at in terms of today's working environments, you see a lot of people are now starting their own business, going self-employed, sole trading. There's that saying that you need a stable job. So do you agree that that's something that we are broken away from that nowadays, or?
I mean, I think it again depends on the individual, right? And like their choices and values and the lifestyle they want to lead. I think running your own business, has its perks, but also comes with, the things around like you might have to work longer hours and people will feel that responsibility because, the buck ends with them. It's not like you can just like close your laptop and
dust your hands, go away.
Goodbye. I'll come back tomorrow if I feel like it.
Yeah.
It depends on what your goals are in life as well, right? And like if you want to have a family or you want to buy a house, like does that align with maybe the trajectory of like starting a business at that time, or do you need that stable income to get a loan, right? Like I think it really depends on kind of what else is happening in your life, or at least I like to think of it more holistically than just like in that aspect of work, like we need stability because that's the expected comfort level for particularly generations before us as well. So I don't have a clear cut answer on that because I think it really depends on your personality. If you're very risk adverse, then stability is probably the best for you because it might, if you decide to go start a business, like you're going to be anxious the whole time about your income flow, cash flow, particularly like with businesses, you do need a certain amount of capital at the beginning, right? Yeah, lots of like factors I think to consider.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. We'll ask one last one for this one in terms of mentality. This is something that I see a lot, and it's like, say you're chasing the same position. Like, for example, I think one episode we're talking with is Aaron, who is a lawyer, or what's he called, associate. And it's like inherent that when you're in that law firm, everyone is chasing that higher position and it becomes inherently competitive. Not necessarily that they're trying to be competitive. It's just like, everyone's trying to work for that position. But it's like a similar case if everyone else is working towards that higher position and it's kind of like competitive. How do you break away from feeling like that? Like feeling that you either can't share your knowledge or can't share your ideas and like being all secretive.
You can start, Jay, if you'd like.
It's a hard one because like I probably don't have personal experience in it, but I think how I'd like to think about it is like just in how I approach work generally. Like it's not a zero-sum game, if that's the right term, right? In terms of yes, there might be one position available at the time, right? And that's very common in FMCG, like in the space that I work in, because there's you probably won't get promoted unless someone leaves or they get promoted. It's like a chain effect after that. So yes, everyone's probably going for that same role if you're all at the same experience level. But I think you can all win in a sense if you're sharing information, like sharing information, sharing what you learn, helping each other out, like having a collaborative, style of working is only going to better you in the long run. Like it may not be the reason you get that role and be the first, like not going to guarantee that, but the things that you'll learn from each other and sharing is always going to outweigh the immediate sort of reactive reward that you might be chasing. It's kind of like in negotiations. Like I remember in uni, one of my favorite courses in management was how to negotiate, and the style of negotiation was always open or like collaborative, I think, not one-sided, I guess. It's like understand the objectives of the other person so that there's a mutual benefit. And I think it's the same even in a work setting, because like we like to talk about when we're in progress, like even if you're in the same industry, like the more you share with each other, the higher the bigger the pie is for everyone to get a slice of, as opposed to I'm just going to cut the slice bigger for me by gatekeeping or protecting the information or not sharing. So that's just my mentality. I probably don't have a personal experience where, I've gone head to head with a friend and, how to overcome that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if you've got stories or.
I think in the industry that Aaron is in, it's almost inherent that happens. And actually, that's one of the main reasons why, one, I really don't like working with people my own age, to be honest, because I actually want to be working with people that are smarter than me. So there's more areas of development. And three, the drama that comes with that vying for that same position. And I think in the legal industry, there's already that competition from uni. It's going for that clerkship, then going for that grad role, and it doesn't end there. You're going from graduate to associate, and then from associate you might not even get the practice area that you like. So the entire thing is a competition, and it's not I think it's not really set up in a way that allows for friendliness, and it just depends on the firm, obviously. But I think the way I see that stereotype is, one, if you're in that unfortunate position where your team is not very transparent, I think the way I would see it is I would, one, protect myself, but also think about my values. I really think it ties down to that, because sometimes in law, especially, you have ethical challenges and you think, okay, well, if I don't do this, this will happen. Am I going to be okay after all this? If I gatekeep and everything, and what if that information was crucial for XYZ? Am I going to walk away from this job in 2 years' time, or even 2 hours later, or 2 days later, thinking I'm going to be okay? So that, in a way, is almost protecting yourself. And I do think there is an element of playing the game where you do need to be smart, but at the same time, you don't want to, especially in law, you don't want to be cutting your connections. And so maybe my advice is, or maybe my thought process is more legal specific, but I think that play smart with your network as well, but at the same time, play true to what you think is right. So if you think gatekeeping it or like sharing it is right for you, then do what's right for you, because at the end of the day, in 2 years' time, you may not be in that position. And I think one piece of advice I would say that I've picked up from my own workplace, and this is not even in my teens, just working in big corporation, is compliment people behind their backs, because it's when you're actually speaking to other people, there won't be any bad things that they could say about you, saying nice things. So that might help offset if you're gatekeeping but you just speak well of someone else.
That's really good
that's good.
advice. And I think as well as that is just be true to yourself. Like you don't have to be competitive just because it's a competitive industry. And it's quite similar in like the design and creative world. Everyone's out there doing the same thing. Like they might have different styles of design, but everyone's trying to design. And I'm also, like you, Jackie, a big believer of just sharing knowledge and just being open, because there's always something to gain from each other. And that's how I've lived by just my work as well. And I'm never like, even down to like, how do you price your pricing tiers, or how do you go and get your clients? Like I'm open to share that idea. And like I also know and put like the caveats that this might not work for you, but this is how I do it. You may be able to try it, might work for you, might not. And the other quote is like, you learn the most when you're teaching other people, so that like when you're sharing your knowledge, you're also teaching something for yourself. So I'm a big advocate of just sharing knowledge, even if it could be a competitive industry, but it doesn't have to be.
I agree. It's all about the team, I feel,
Yeah.
and obviously extends to the industry as well eventually.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end of our episode. I wanted to ask you both, what is the top 3 tips you could provide to someone out there to help them build a better mindset who are those specifically going through challenging times in their career right now?
I'll start with one. I think definitely know yourself quite well. Like we've spoken about so much, like your values, but also where your boundaries lie and make them clear, particularly if you are in a new role or even if you're not and you've been in the role for a while, like have that conversation with your manager because they will have direct impact, obviously, on what that looks like. And if you're clear in it and they're clear in it, then there's no ambiguity, at the end. Like, for example, it's like if you really need to go to that gym class after work, then I need to clock off at 5:30. So it actually helps with my productivity because I need that reset so that I'm the best performer when I come in the next day. So, things like that, I think you need to be clear for yourself, but then communicate that to your team and the people around you as well.
No, that's a good one.
Agree with what Jackie said. That's also a work in progress for me. Boundaries, but I would say the top tip for myself when it comes to someone who's going through a challenging time with their career, and this I would say speaks to my personality, I would say more so. So it might not work for everyone, but I'm a very open, transparent person. I'm very receptive to feedback. I like to really self-develop and learn about new things about myself and others. And so taking that background in mind, my tip comes down to one, be really open and honest with yourself first and foremost. Like actually check in with yourself and say, okay, if I'm not happy, why is it that I'm not happy? Is it a challenging time because it just happens because of the company restructuring, or is it because of the people around me? Or like actually sit down and have that honest conversation with yourself. And then I actually believe that you should talk to someone you trust and bounce ideas. And if you just want them to be a soundboard, then so be it. But then going through those motions will add different perspectives. And then finally, after you've done all the talking and thinking and reflecting, I would say is be receptive to changing, because there's a lot of talking, but sometimes there's not enough action, which I understand is not easy to get to. But I think if you already got your mind set from the get-go and being receptive comes so much easier to change, and you can actually initiate that change earlier. And so you're not stuck in that position, I would say, for much longer than you need to be. And again, you have to take into account your situation, your mental health and everything. There's my caveat and disclaimer.
No, I
That's
like
awesome.
that. That's a really good.
Yeah.
And final tip?
One other tip, I think, to bounce off what Shell said more in a practical sense that I found has worked is like have like quarterly check-ins where you sit down, and maybe even it's through journaling, because it's like putting it on paper sometimes just makes it more real or gets it out of your brain, to see how you're truly going like at work, and like, are you enjoying it? Has it shifted from what you thought it would be? Does it still ladder up to your values? It just helps unpick it and does a bit of that self-reflection in a more tangible and physical way. So I found that that's helped. And when you start a routine, if you're doing it quarterly or whatever cadence you feel like is necessary, then it kind of keeps you accountable as well to see it sort of on paper. So yeah, that's probably something would help with shifting mindset too.
It's crazy how once you say something, like bring it out from your head, sometimes you even answer your own questions. Like, for example, if I'm like blabbing and being like, this is a problem, this is what I'm thinking, that's like what I'm struggling with, and it's like, oh wait, I can just do this. And it's like, oh, that's it. Like, just fix your own problem. Like sometimes it's just you got to take it out of your head, and it's not as big as you think it is.
Agree.
Self-talk is honestly the best therapy sometimes.
He talks to himself all the time.
We're not crazy.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you. Like, there's so much more to pick apart, and there's so many more questions we want to ask. But yeah, we really enjoyed all the advice and all the knowledge and things that you've shared with us. And before you leave, we'll let you guys share some plugs or anywhere that people can find you.
Yeah, so we're on Instagram, Women in Progress Oz, AUS. So you can find all of our content and our updates there. And then the podcast is Candid Conversations on all major streaming platforms.
Lovely, nice and simple.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Sam and Amelia. It's been a really great morning chatting to you guys. I feel like this is a pocket rocket when it comes to really great career journey and / advice and knowledge. So thank you so much for having us.
No,
it's a
so
pleasure.
glad to have you guys on. It's our pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And for the listeners out there, join us in the next one and we will see you there.
Soon. Bye.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.